Yeah, that's good.
Paper sort of transaction.
So I've done that. I'm not sure I'm going to get. And look,
Great. All right. So we are now live. Just to let you know, the recording started. So just like to welcome everyone back to the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. We just adjourned for a break because all the councillors have been in a committee this morning. So I'll do the welcome again, and good to see everyone here. I'm going to open with a karakia. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I waho, tūtaua mai I roto. Kia tau e te maritu, te Māori ora ki te katoa. Homie, huie, taikie. And just to repeat that, I summon from above, below, outside and within, to calm and settle the inner vital essence, the well-being of everyone who joined together, united. All right, thank you everyone. I know you all had a very busy morning, but now that we've all been watered and fed, we can focus our minds on the risk and assurance matters for today. So, looking through our agenda, just on the welcome. The apologies, we do have one. That is three.
About four, I think. Councillor Ludlow, Jeremy is no longer here. John Pemberton.
Yep, that's it.
Three.
Yep, that's right. Yep, so there's two for leave and Jeremy was unavailable.
All right, fantastic. So we will vote that. It will
Happy to move the apologies to be accepted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Nicole, and second by Doris. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Just to remind everyone, if there is anything that comes forward today that you would like to declare a conflict, perceived or actual, please note that, and we've received none so far. Public forum. Again, we have not had anyone wish to come and talk to us to the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. I'm sure there will be someone one day, but not today. Confirmation of the minutes that are attached. We'd like to have a peruse of those.
Happy to move those as being accurate.
Thank you, Phil.
Second that.
Thank you, Alistair. Notification of extraordinary items or urgent business. I have received none. Questions. I have received none either.
You want a verbal one? Just a quick,
Absolutely.
quick clarification. Our auditors are set to us by the government, aren't they? We don't have a choice in auditors?
Correct. So correct. They are assigned to us from the OAG, which is a government entity. Yeah.
Thank you.
But we can, certainly when they're here, but later, it's happy to confirm.
Yeah, no, I had that conversation earlier today. They're here at the behest of the Office of the Auditor General. So the Office of the Auditor General is of a size that they can't do all of the audits themselves. So they contract their work to third parties, but they're actually doing the audit that otherwise the OAG would have done.
And the price is set by a government contract or a something contract?
It is, but I think we can have that discussion when they're here because there is a paper on it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman and councillors' reports. So, from myself, just a little reflection over the last few days when I was reading your the papers that are in our pack and thinking about where the council was at the moment. Certainly LTP, the long-term plan, is what is receiving a lot of the focus at the moment, and we've been having some good, robust discussions in that space. I then sat back and thought about audit and risk in our committee and our terms of reference, and it did remind me, and just so I thought I'd say it out loud, that there are some good tools in our toolbox of this committee that can help with some of the things in the LTP. And by that I mean in terms of making sure that some of those commitments come to life over the next 3 years or 10 years. Some of the tools, we have our external auditors, and they have a terms of reference themselves, so we can use that and ask them questions. We have now an internal audit function, which are delivering their first report to us today. So that's a great tool in our toolbox. And also we ask if that internal audit function is by another external party, and we can direct them to look at things. And then we ask management to come and talk to us on specific areas of risk through some of our risk deep dives. That helps us as governors sort of understand where some of our risks may lie and what we should do about them. So, as you've sort of been through your LTP deliberations, we can now sort of look to how this committee can help over the coming years. Make sure some of those things come to life. So some of my reflections on it. Anyone else have any?
Well, just a brief report. We've pretty much finalised the LTP, but this is certainly not the end of the journey, as we've alluded to, on the continuing improvement of performance journey. And while not everybody will be happy we've landed, I hope that most reasonable people will say the council listened, we've made some hard decisions in difficult times, but we will continue on the journey, and this committee is integral to some of those decisions.
Thank you. Anyone else with anything that I'd like to report? I'll move on. All right. As we go through the agenda today, there are a couple of items that have moved. That's just because some of the speakers who are coming have to leave at certain times, external parties, such as the auditor. But we're going to start with report number 9.1, which is our risk management report. And I can invite Tanya to the front, please. Thank you, Tanya, for your paper. It's good to see you again. It's a standing item page, but great if you'd like to give a little verbal update first.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'd like to take the report as read. The key pieces of information in this quarter's report are the risk management framework, which we've spent considerable time reviewing, finalising and tweaking. The executive have reviewed and approved the report. There's also the risk management policy there, which sits alongside the risk management framework. And this is the key document that will drive our risk management program moving forward. It talks about how we assess risks, how we manage them, how we report them, both within the organisation and through to the Risk and Assurance Committee, and if necessary through to the full council. So I would welcome any thoughts, considerations, feedback, questions.
Any questions from the floor to start with?
Are we talking about, at the moment, are we talking about sorry.
Yeah, 9.1, the risk management, that's right.
Other items coming out.
That's fine. I'd just like to say, so thank you for delivering the risk management framework. I didn't read it word for word. It's a rather lengthy document, but I had skimmed it, and it looks like a very good document, sort of what I would expect in this organisation. So that's great to have that finalised. So thank you very much for doing that. I did have one question on another piece of the paper. On the business continuity section, so it looks like that's been progressing well, and I know we've been getting updates over the last each committee on the area, so that's been good to see. And you've highlighted, I know there's some feedback, but I think let's go. You've highlighted what you've done and that there is still some work to be done as well. And I was just wondering if we could get sight over that, maybe whether it's sort of in a table form or something, so we could see what's sort of left to do, so we can sort of just monitor the progress?
What I can do is give you an update, and Amy may want to add further. There is a paper going to the executive next week, I believe, outlining the findings from the training and the exercise that were undertaken by Kestrel. There were some recommendations in there, so we do have a list of actions. We've assigned those actions, we've put dates around those actions. So firstly, I would like the executive to be able to review that and cast their eye over it. And then I believe there's no reason why it can't come to this committee.
What she did.
Yeah, fantastic. That'd be
Just
great
give
to
us an
just,
opportunity to get the views of the executive before it comes here.
fantastic.
Because there may be changes, there may be some other amendments that they request, so.
Yes, well, a very good report. I'm looking at the flow chart on 31, and I'm just thinking we can have policies, but it'd be quite good to have them on the wall in various departments so that it's front of mind to the organisation. This is some very good information there on risk management.
Can I just respond to that first? Look, absolutely agree, and I think the key to all of this is, and the question and the thing that we need to be reporting on going forwards is how we're operationalising this. So we've got the document that talks about here's how we should be doing things. How are we actually doing things? How do we make sure that those risk conversations are happening within the teams? How are we reporting on operational risk? You know, you see the strategic risks as the governors, but there's layers of risk between that we're managing at an enterprise level as well. So yes, completely agree.
Yeah, kind of was thinking that as you develop the risk framework, have you sort of benchmarked against how other like organisations have done it, other regional councils?
Absolutely.
So that, because I would imagine that with technology merging and shared software solutions that help us to track, manage, report on risk, that if it's sort of standardised across different regions, that'll make it easier. So
Yeah, absolutely. This risk management framework document, the basis of it was the original document that was prepared prior to my joining. I think, was it Neil or was it Chris Wood?
Yeah, well, it's been an iterative journey, so both those
Probably a
names
combination
are involved,
of
yeah.
both. So that was the base document. What I've added to it is what I've learned from my previous experience in risk management area, granted in a different industry, but I've also looked at what other councils are doing. Councils are fantastic at sharing information, so I've had various iterations of risk management frameworks from lots of different councils. It's always a hot topic of discussion. People are always reviewing it. So yes, we've taken a lot of probably the better parts of some of those risk frameworks. Software sits completely outside in my mindset because we need to get the framework right before we actually start then looking down the track to a software that can support the framework that we've come up with. So the plan now is, as Amy's mentioned, the program to actually start integrating this across the rest of the organisation. So now we're comfortable that we've nailed this, we're all comfortable with this, we're now going to start introducing it across the organisation.
and I guess that line of inquiry was just on the basis I've seen other organisations where, even internationally, they kind of share their mistakes so that collectively they are better able to manage, preempt, understand where they're potentially carrying risk.
And definitely.
And even something as simple as using the same language or terminology can really help with that sharing of
It's always evolving, to be fair. So actually keeping those networks open and keeping communicating with those guys is quite vital, and we do a fair amount of that both within the Southland or Southern region. We've actually got a risk assurance group for the lower part of the South Island, but there's also national communication around those areas as well.
And just like building on that, and I guess from a top down and a bottom up approach, the regional sector particularly is joined up as a network, Taylor Kahika, looking at opportunities to share services. But within that, we have the special interest groups, which include the risk managers and most other functional areas in the organisation, which as Tania was saying, really do look at sharing knowledge and information, and the development of Te Ora Kahika is actually looking at, from a top-down point of view, how do we share the issues and problems to collectively resolve them, what's the appropriate shared services response versus individual council response.
Mr. Chairman,
Ross.
on page 37 is a table of environmental consequence matrices. And as an example, the third one down is reputation and image. And some would say that over the past few months, the council's image is not high, and certainly in some sectors of the community. I wonder what particular action program based on the risk policy that we can expect to see to address that issue.
Okay, the consequences matrix is one of the tools that we use to assess our risks. So we've identified our strategic risks. What we do is identify the likelihood that that is going to happen, and then we take a full picture view of the consequences, because some of the risks may have a primary focus on reputation, but some of them may be primarily on finance. So what we're doing is making a subjective assessment based on this criteria that the executive have worked fairly hard to try and nail the wording. So we have a risk, and it may actually be in one of the deep dives.
I think I think you're right in terms of the risk, because your point around what's been happening in our risk register, we've identified a couple of risks. I think one would be around how we communicate with the community, and one is around effective decision making, which actually gets talked about in today's papers.
Yes.
So those risks will be addressing the area that you're
Concerned about. Yes.
concerned with. Yeah, which is
Can I just add to that? So yeah, the reputational outcomes are an outcome of how we do our work, and it's an outcome of what might be going on in the broader environment. So we have this program of deep dives that we bring to councillors at this table every quarter, where we do look at the risks themselves and the controls and the mitigations that we have in place to either stop the risk from occurring or minimise its impact. There could be a number of things that give rise to the particular outcome that you are talking about. So it's not necessarily one silver bullet, if you like, that solves that problem per se. And in terms of that particular issue that you raise, I'd say there are a number of work streams across the council where, through the delivery of those work streams, we're looking to give positive effect or mitigate the risk that's currently existing out there in terms of reputation.
I guess what I'm asking for is a, dare I say, report on when an issue, and this is just one example, an issue is identified, it's brought up like through this committee, and then there is something that is actively done to address the issue and to see what we can do to avoid it from happening again in the future.
Those are the deep dives, are they not? Or is there something that I'm misunderstanding from what you were saying?
Yeah, I can see two parts to it. One would be around the risk of deep dives and getting the staff to go away and then come back to us and explain those particular areas.
Yeah.
And then if there is actually a specific issue that arises, then by all means we could ask for a paper to be presented on the learnings from that issue. That would be in our remit.
Well, I think it's probably reasonable to say that there are some concerns and that we need to have some actions taken to see whether or not how valid they are. If they are valid, then how do we address those so that we can avoid them happening in the future? And that might be the deep dive, but it might also be a particular issue that needs to be addressed. That's very important to the council.
I don't have the list of the deep dives to hand. and I don't know if you've got one there, Tania, whether there's one that I'm really feeling there might be, you know, that we don't have the trust and the confidence of the community to, you know, progress our policy and move with them on that. And certainly, so A, I can go away and confirm that. And secondly, if that's a risk that's of interest to this committee in respect of your particular question, I'm not sure when we're next scheduled to address that, but we can certainly play with the order and bring that to the next committee if that was something that everybody would like to see.
Well, that's just extending that idea. I guess we've come through the LTP process and we were courageous, we were bold, ambitious, we engaged with the public on a lot of topics, but we have received some criticism around the mode of consultation that, and for better or worse, for correct or incorrect, we did receive some criticism. The way the LTP has progressed, we have undertaken to move into the next 12-month period and do further consultation on the rates, some of the rates stuff. I would have thought of that in that case, maybe there's an opportunity to more quickly turn around. What did we learn from the latest trance of consultation, and how do we want to immediately draw lessons from that to inform the pending consultation that we're about to embark upon in the next 12 months?
Yes, I think a few of us thought, you know, we need to sit down, and this is probably the committee to have a report to come to. So what went well, what can we improve on? Because if we're on that journey of continuous improvement, there's always learnings. So,
So rather than a deep dive, it might be turned into an immediate dive.
I think that's really important.
Agreed.
So I think so we'll have that as an action coming
Action.
away in terms of learnings. Learnings from and start to write paper on that.
And just back to Tania about the, you got that there?
Yes, I have. On page 22, we've got the schedule of risks to be discussed at this meeting. And in November, we looked at the community and stakeholders support council's approach to delivering required outcomes. So are we suggesting that you want a review of that particular risk, or are you talking a review of the LTP process?
Yeah, it was more around some learnings from
From
the
the LTP.
LTP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've
All right,
only
great.
just done that one, so.
Great. All right, fantastic. Okay, so someone like to move? Yeah, Morris, and second by and Nicole. In favour?
Aye.
Against? Moved. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. So we're just going to change the order of the next item, and we're going to move to what would be 9.3. So the deep dive from Dominic into information to enable effective decision making. So that's on page 49. Apologies, Dominic, if I have called you up a little bit earlier than you thought.
He's intelligent, he'll be right.
All right, so we're on page 49, 9.3. That's one of the deep dives. So deep dives being one of the standing items, but the risk area changes each time, and we've got a couple of them to do in today's committee. 3. So thank you very much for providing the paper, but if you'd like to give a quick summary and then we can ask questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this paper sort of follows on the back of September, the September Risk and Assurance, where the deep dive was in our information systems. And so that had quite a technological focus. And then this is coming in just talking a little bit more about some of the processes we have in place, some of the ways we manage our information and data in the organisation. Management of data and availability of information and the quality of information is absolutely critical to, and that works they complement the systems part of it. The systems are no good if we don't have that quality of data and information in the first part. And so what the paper sort of touches on here is some of the ways we manage the information to give ourselves the comfort and the assurance that we are making decisions based on this information, that it's not only supported by the technology, but we can take some faith in knowing that we are making good decisions based on the information being presented to us. And there's a couple of things sort of touched on in the paper around the preventative controls around the information management governance group, and then they got the information management strategy as well, which was developed sort of late last what might have been the start of the financial year, start of the 23-24 year, and that sort of sets out the roadmap of how we're going to go about developing that, continue to build along some of the things we've already put in place. So unless there was any sort of specific questions, I'll be happy to.
Any questions from the floor? Morris?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to bring up an issue which I think I'm reading through this. Report is of a real concern. The report talks about having good information for it to be reliable so we can have make good decisions. But as an example of what I think was core information presented at a workshop last week on coastal plan review, it had a table in it which listed all the species that we needed to take account of that live in the coastal area. Now, this report contained the name of the species and then where it lived and its particular risks, so that if we're making decisions in relation to the coast, we would take those into account. But the list of species and where they lived and what their habitat requirements were was very deficient. Had very many species weren't there at all. Many species that were listed there were incorrectly described in terms of their behaviour, where they lived, and what the issues were. Now, not too many people would know that sort of thing. You know, whether it was a banded doctrine or a New Zealand doctrine, it's quite a specialised field. But because I've worked in that area for many years, I know these things. So it's an example. I did mention it at the meeting, obviously, but it is an example of us not living up to what this policy says we ought to live up to. So I'm just bringing it up here to say that is something that needs a bit of attention.
Yep.
And wonder how the report could have got to this workshop, which had kind of other people at it as well, in such a inadequate state, really.
And I'll certainly sort of pick it up, sort of turning that into a question for you, Dominic. I noticed that the original risk rating for this topic was low residual risk, and through the deep dive that's been done, the staff have moved it to a high rating, because knowing that, as it's said in here, I'll get you to talk on it, mitigating controls to support this aren't fully in place.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so this is an organisation that not only consumes a lot of information, it creates a lot of information as well. And so it presents a challenge on a number of different fronts in terms of how do we ensure the validity of what's being presented going forward. And so, in part what's reflected in that status upgrade in terms of, the risk upgrade, is that is a sort of an ongoing focus. So we've kind of almost grouping the sort of information we can try to work through to have absolute certainty and comfort that this type of information is we know we can rely on.
Yeah. And
then it's about getting together and saying, how do we bring all these pieces of information together and make that connection, and that's absolutely something we're looking to build on this year, is to build all the bits and pieces of information, not only to connect it, but to make sure we're not duplicating some of the research or some of the requests or some of the information, and potentially producing different results. So,
Amy, did you?
Yeah, so just to build on that as well, because sometimes I can't speak to the specific issue that you identified, but actually thinking about the factors that might have led to that, and that may have not been talked to so much in here, but actually having the time to actually make good decisions is an important thing to be able to do. Having the time to check, making sure that the right documents are going through the right control processes at the right time, also, really important. And we have a staff that have a wide number of things that they need to get over. There are time pressures which sometimes impact on decision making. So these are also things that can impact where information ends up and the quality of information. So it's not just where it came from and how was it cleaned. It was just like how was it thought about, the rest of it. I think Lucy might have something to add to that.
Yeah, go. Yep. On the specific example, no, yeah, that's fine on that specific example, because I think it's the overarching process. Nicole, did you?
Look, yeah, thanks for this report, Dom, and the deep dive does show a few things we probably already know. Our IT system doesn't shake hands well with some of our other technology. There's still a lot of manual interactions, and sometimes they're not put in properly. But yeah, the focus on becoming more customer focused and outcome focused, it's a really important goal. But a lot of the information we have at the moment is not easy for the public to access or understand. We've got some fantastic science, but for the public to go in and look at it, and we probably want a reasonably simple explanation of whether it's water quality or quantity. We're probably not quite there yet, and we've talked about the IRIS and the new technology coming. I think we've struggled for the last few years on actually getting that link up, and I think there's still a lot of manual stuff that IT is supposed to save us time, and I don't think we've quite got there yet. But I think this is a good report, and you're talking about a single source of truth. So I'm assuming that people aren't all just going to the same site at the moment, or it's not in the one place to actually get there.
And just the last point, yeah, Phil.
I was just going to ask Don, the key information that enables decision making, probably you'd consider that as a subset of a wide pool of information. And I know a lot of organisations talk about knowledge management, and that's the idea that staff churn through an organisation. They can leave with taking information knowledge with them. Do we have a broader philosophical view on how we manage knowledge within ES to capture, for instance, someone like Paul Holtz who's about to leave? How have we downloaded all of the data in his brain before we lose him to, for instance, to tap into that? Have we got a system or arrangements that?
We've had I suppose a number of starts in this in the past, and we've invested in process mapping tools, for example, to capture some of the things that tend to live in people's heads, and so that they're easily accessible when people do that. We are looking at sort of a data warehousing capability that can connect a number of disparate systems to bring the information together as well. And the challenge we face in terms of the currency of some of this knowledge, and the internet would be an ideal place to store that, but then it involves dedicated effort in terms of ensuring that it's all up to date and relevant. So there's a few, and this comes back to the time thing that sort of Amy touched on. But there's certainly an awareness of it. It's certainly impacted us all, to differing degrees in terms of either difficulty finding information or possibly conflict in information. So you're acutely aware of it, and that's we'll be sort of working in that priority base of information to eventually get to that knowledge base where we have that one source for all.
Last thing, Amy.
Yeah, and just to that, we have a phenomenal amount of information, and not all of it's useful, not all of it's relevant, some of it's dated, and some of it's untapped. So to think about knowledge management just in a different sense, and I've talked to the committee about this, or the former committee, OPAC, about the chief archivist talking about this digital landfill that we've got of information, but it can, sometimes having to sift through that to find the stuff that's really important speaks to the importance of, good information governance, making sure that we're disposing of as well as acquiring, and that we do have the, the tools and a level of sophistication around the tools to be able to really use them to pull the nuggets and the gems and the insights out for us to be able to, use in our work.
So I'll just make a final sort of statement on this. So I think it's a well-written paper, and it's certainly highlighted to us that we're not where we need to be in the space. And so I asked the question, how can we get there? How can us as a governance group support staff? Is it budget? Is it resource? Or is it something else in terms of just keeping an eye on progress? And I don't know the answer to that at the moment, but obviously we're not where we need to be today. And there's probably a few papers today which have a similar theme in it in terms of how can we help internally the organisation to progress some of these areas which are vital to deliver externally. All right, who would like to move? Phil, thank you. Second. Elsa, thank you. Thank you very much. In favour? Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Moved. Thank you. Okay, we are now going to move. Should we get partners? Should we ask if he is available?
9.7.
Have you got?
Would that be right, or should we move to another one?
Okay, fantastic.
Fantastic. So we're going to move to 9.7,
9.7.
which is page 141.
Could start, Chair, if you like, by introducing the item.
That would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair. So in front of us, we have two papers, the audit proposal letter and the audit plan. While we're waiting for Ian Smith, our partner from Deloitte, I just go through these. As it says here in the item, we have a 3-year agreement already in place with Deloitte. As one of the councillors asked earlier, Deloitte are appointed by the Auditor General.
Yep, jump on in, Anthony. Welcome.
And Anthony is our partner for the appointment and has taken with him today. The item includes the fee proposal, as I mentioned, and the audit plan. In the past, the audit fee proposal was put in place for 3 years, and we found, and Deloitte's found during the COVID times and all the changes that have gone on, that wasn't working. And so we've had an annual fee proposal. So the fee proposal this year is $157,000 excluding GST. I've made some notes there about that, and the number of hours that the staff have committed to auditing over years have contributed to that. Before we go on to discuss the audit plan, I'd like to pick Anthony to make any comments on his proposed on the fee proposal and the fact that it does go through the Auditor General's office for review before we get there.
I'll just do welcome. So welcome Anthony and Tegan as well, both from Deloitte. And just to remind everyone at the committee that this paper here is focused on the year-end financial audit, which is a separate audit to the LTP audit. So this paper is not going to talk about LTP audit matters and just talk about the upcoming year-end financial audit, just because it is ring-fenced for that. All right, welcome Anthony.
Cool, I'm Tim McCoy. Thanks for having us along here today. It's an important part of the audit process to have engagement with the committee and the auditors. Is Tanya Andrews, I'm joined by Tegan, who's on Tanya's left, who's the audit manager. She's worked with Environment South for a number of years now, so is well familiar with with the council. Just commenting on the fee part first, introduced it, you're correct. So the way that the process works is the OAG sort of sits across, the OAG is the auditor of council and we do the audit on their behalf. They have insight across the whole sector in terms of time spent on the audit. So as part of the audit process, we submit all of our hours to the OAG, and that's how one way that they monitor us in terms of the time that we spend. Tanya is right. A couple of years ago, we used to do 3-year fee proposals. High inflation during COVID just made that very difficult. So we've gone to an annual basis. In the current year fee, you'll see an increase from last year of circa $8,000, $8,500. That's purely wage inflationary. That's at a rate agreed by the OAG. They essentially vet and approve this before it gets presented to council. You'll also note in the audit proposal letter, we've increased the number of audit hours in the tables. That's really a reflection of the last few years' actuals on what it actually takes to do the audit. Audits are increasingly complex. I think Tanya noted in her paper, that the fee has moved for those increased hours. So they essentially have a $0 fee. But I thought it was important just to disclose in the audit proposal letter, rather than consistently showing we were never letting the hours in there, actually let's get the hours right. So you'll see that come through, but there's no impact to council of those hours changing. So those are probably that's the background and summary of that.
Right. Any questions at the moment? Alistair?
Really, when we look at it, your fees and things are set by another body, aren't they?
Essentially, it's up to council to approve them.
Yeah, but if we said no, disappear, we couldn't get another auditor, could we?
Well, no, so I'm appointed on behalf of the Auditor General. They are your auditors, and you can't choose to go anywhere else. Correct?
So we've got a problem in our province at the moment, and we've just been reminded of that through a heap of submissions that nobody or very few people can afford to pay. Now, you can come along and stick your rates up, and we don't have choice.
Well, I guess there is probably if you fundamentally disagree, we can go through a process to deal
No,
with
no,
it.
no, but that's how it sits, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's a robust process happens.
So is that correct? Should we all be tightening our belts?
I guess what I'd say on that is, again, I've increased the hours at zero fee.
But when we go out to our constituents, it's just a figure. They don't know about the hours or whatever's happening. The hours are increased because there's increased regulations, I suppose. But in the last lot you did, you made a mistake. Who's responsible?
If we draw the question, I think, is around the fee setting process.
Correct.
And I guess if people have expectations of for other areas, you might go out and receive 3 quotes for something, and then choose a person based on of which price is one. And here we don't. Can you just talk more about that fee setting process? I don't know what the discussions are with OAG, how things work
Sure. So they've got insight across essentially all councils across New Zealand. So they know what the fee, the market rates are, what it should take. And they're essentially holding us to account that we are delivering on what they would expect to see across the sector. So, so we could double our hours, double the fee, that would be caught through the OAG process, because they'd call that out very, very quickly. So they're challenging us constantly on the time that we're putting into the audit, again, because they've got insight across the sector.
So I certainly there is something there, Alistair, in terms of the fact that any public sector organisation must be audited by the OAG.
Correct. I
Yeah,
know
so
that.
that's the,
That's
so
why.
that is the, so we are sort of just caught in this bit of rule setting of which.
But those rules are set outside what's going on within our environment, so we just got to put up with it.
Yeah, we're price taken for that, fortunately. Nicole, I know you had your hand up first.
Right, was just adding to that conversation, and you know, Deloitte's are actually caught in a rigid system, but I'm wondering if what we try to do as councils at time is if you've got people that are performing at a high level, that compliance may not be as stringent. So if a council had a really good record, potentially the ability, and obviously would be a parliamentary decision of direction, that over the 3 years, you look at the sections, so over 3 years, you cover the whole audit gambit. And that would actually probably give a financial reward to people who consistently do a good job. And the old story we talk about, it's often you don't want to rule for 80% of doing the right thing, you actually want to focus on people that aren't. Is that technically possible? I know the Auditor General is independent, but I guess Parliament can change from time to time the parameters. Is that a conceivable possibility?
Did you want to?
I just wanted to add, Chair, that government, not just, XRB, not just the government, continually adding standards to the international reporting framework, which we're continually having to be audited on, in addition to the government framework. So we're not an ordinary organisation in terms of the multiple layers that we have over our reporting. I'd like to challenge the councillor on the mistake quote.
It was to do with consultants. We put in at $7 million. It was a mistake in our system, but it wasn't picked up.
No, and I'd like to correct the meeting on that. That particular item was not actually audited by Deloitte during the consultation. They audited only the consultation document. So that was a mistake made by the finance team that wasn't picked up internally.
Okay, I understood, I'll go to I rather than we, understood that had been audited.
And I might have led to that mistake. I said it had been audited, it had been reviewed, and we discussed that with the chair, that the audit at the consultation stage was only on the audit document, on the senior document. So we may have placed undue reliance on
whatever it is, but the other point that I was going to make is that Deloitte seemed to do it every year. Is that correct?
Do what, sorry?
Do the auditing every year?
They've been appointed for some years. I don't know what the length of.
Yeah, the OAG works on 3-year contracts. So they basically, that's how it works. We're in year 2 of a 3-year contract, and the OAG decides at the end of that 3 years if we're going to continue. We wouldn't typically just do 3 years because there's quite a lot of back-end investment goes into the audit and a lot of institutional knowledge. So they wouldn't go changing that around every 3-year period, but they do from time to time.
Yeah, so it is a contract of 3-year period. Maurice, did you have a question there?
No, well, other than to say that, that the OAG is an organisation that makes sure that the auditors that they appoint are doing the job effectively and efficiently, and there are standards to meet and tests to make sure that that does happen. So I think it's a pretty rigorous process.
Yes. So, and I would concur with that. Just looking at the time, and so probably just to say that sort of also understand the process that they go through, and also the amount of work. And I think there is this thing in terms of just making sure that we all understand and we see the value from the audit that comes through. Because I know sometimes the reports or just the opinions are short and sharp. There's actually a whole lot of other work that goes on behind the scenes. So you try and make sure that value comes out. All right. I think
We're happy to move to the audit plan.
Yes, all right.
Thank you. I'll, Now Anthony to introduce the plan and the outcomes.
So we're just on page 149.
What I'll do, I have, assuming I've got your latest pack, and hopefully I've got the right page numbers. If I just refer you to page 155 of your pack, if I've got that right, should be a dashboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent, that's a good
Oh,
start.
154.
Okay, that's page 6 of our report. This is just a good place to just reflect. These are our proposed focus areas for the 2024 annual audit. Our audit process starts next week, and part of that is determining our audit risk areas in terms of the sort of bigger ticket items that we focus on. The ones that we've listed here are consistent with last year. Just probably just wanted to reflect on that. I will, and I should have said at the start as well, if anyone's got any questions as we go through, just feel free to interrupt as we go. If not, we'll give time at the end. If I just move to the next page, I'm not going to talk about every focus area in detail, so if there is something anyone is interested in, please do chip in. The first two areas are consistent with last year. The first one being rates. It's a large balance. It's the main revenue generating activity of the council. Our work around rates is really looking at the numerical accuracy as well as checking the compliance with the rating policies in terms of, there's a lot of rules around what you must include in the rates invoice, for example. So checking off all of that. The next area around management override is one I always have to explain. It's a little bit audit technical. What that focus area says, it's presumed under the auditing standards, we must look at that. What that says is that management, given the nature of their position, is in a unique position to override your control environment. So what does that mean? That means that we focus on things like accounting estimates, so any provisions that you've got, anything that just requires that little bit of judgment. It says we focus on journal entries, so that the individual manual entries going into the system. So we look at those as well. Really looking for those areas in your financial statements that can easily be overridden. I'll just turn to Tegan. We'll talk through the next two focus areas.
So the next one is consistent with the prior statement of performance. Our approach to testing is also going to be similar to last year, where we will look at a sample of measures to test them to ensure that the conclusion reached is accurate and that they can be reliably measured. We just want to make sure that you guys are aware that the measures are based on the 2021 LTP, not the new LTP that's underway at the moment. And then the next area of focus is the group consolidation with Southport New Zealand Limited. This entity continues to be audited by Deloitte as well, and we will use that team's work to support our overall audit opinion. To do this, we issue referral instructions to the Southport team, noting that their focus areas are revenue recognition and management override of controls as well. And then the Southport team is still considering the impact of the TY announcement with the 20-year signing deal on how this will impact their audit, and we'll update on this in due course.
And next page is it's a pretty busy page, but just acknowledging that as part of the audit process, we issued a brief from the Auditors General, which we get a new brief each year, which gives us specific focus areas that they want us to look at. We've listed those on the left. They're pretty consistent with the previous year. There's nothing sort of massively new coming through, but you can see that outside of the core financial statements and things that we look at, that's probably the main one there is around sensitive expenditure. So we deep dive into those account balances, and it's things like travel, meals, entertainment, that sort of stuff, at a more granular detail, again on a sample basis, ensuring that that type of expenditure has the right approval process and would, stand up to public scrutiny. So that's a unique test that we do for an OAG engagement. There's a few different things coming through that brief, just for your noting. In terms of paper, the next thing I was going to actually talk about was space, but we've already covered that. So you're happy to take any questions on any of those areas, and then also just ask the committee through you, Andrew, if there's anything else that we should be considering as part of our audit planning for this year's audit.
Any questions to start?
Just one, can I just ask, how long has climate change been a feature of the OAG audit?
A couple of years now. What we're starting to see more traction every year in terms of climate. What we're looking for there is that to the extent it's impacting you from a financial statement perspective, it doesn't impact you as much. It's been more around if you valued your assets, which you don't, but making sure you're considering any impact of climate and things like valuations. You've also got some performance measures currently that have a climate angle to it as well. So sometimes the data of these types of measures is very difficult to audit. Your current measures are probably not on that degree of complexity currently, but other councils out there, they are. So there's a whole raft of specific guidance on how to deal with that, but it's getting a whole lot more traction across the sector.
All right. And I do not believe there are any other matters from us that you need to be aware of in terms of things going on. So, right, can I have someone move, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Nicole. Second. Thank you, Phil. In favour?
Aye.
Against? Moved. Thank you very much, Anthony and Tegan. Appreciate it.
See you in September, I guess.
Right, looking at our agenda, 9.6 is up next, which is the insurance update. And I believe they're going to be looking at Aon presenting online. Pick them to join us now, which would be right.
Thank you. We've got Tracy.
We're on page 114 of our pack.
Thank you, Chair. I'm joined today by Tracy Arkendorf, team leader, finance operations. And online we have Deanna McDonald, who's the New Zealand manager for local government. I'm not sure if I said that correctly. You can update us, Deanna. And Sally Parker, who is our Aon manager locally. The insurance update, Chair, has been brought forward in the past. This was an item that we would do later in the year. After one renewal and literally at the time of the next renewal, having our insurances at that time renewed in two parts. We've asked that we bring this item forward to you earlier in the year so that we're doing this review with you and we can identify any areas of interest, a specific interest that you might have, or queries on the actual policies. Our past independent member, Chris Robertson, did point out that while it was very interesting to get the insurance report post-renewal, it was a little bit, he felt cart before horse. So that's what we're doing, and it's, I believe it's the right thing to do, of course, and it's working out well. The item asks that you receive the report and note the feedback on the summary of council insurances held, and also feedback on our presentation, which you'll see shortly. We have a substantial width and breadth and depth of insurance. As you noted earlier, we have a number of risks in this council, and we do our best to insure against those that are insurable. As the item says, up until this point, we have split those insurances between two brokers, two large international brokerages that work together with other councils. So we have been in two effective pools of risk, and Aon will explain, our ladies from Aon will explain that and the benefits of that. And similarly with the previous broker, Marsh. We have no choice in that. That is literally the only way we can insure these days, to become part of a very large pool to spread that risk. And Deanna's got some really good insight on that. So without, one thing I'd like to note for you before we get into the presentation, Chair, is that the challenges within this placing of risk means that our broker Marsh has actually been unable to place our liability insurance this year. Now, this is international placement in London largely, and they've come back to us at the beginning of the month and advised us of that. Now, this affects the many councils who are insured with Marsh as well. And we've asked Aon to put forward a proposal for that, to pick up that policy of policies as listed there: public liability, professional indemnity, harbour master, and environmental impairment. So that's a very recent change, and so this year we'll be actually placing all our insurances with Aon in two tranches. This one at 30th of June for the liability insurance, and then later for our standard asset insurance. Before we go to the presentation, are there any questions from the committee on the summary of insurance that you have?
Just one question out there. Obviously, our biggest asset is our flood infrastructure. When I look at this list of the top risks, it hardly seems to down about 9. But who was doing that before? Was Marsh doing that? Or?
No, that is with Aon. Yeah.
Can I just confirm, because one of the biggest pieces of this paper was saying that the Marsh cannot provide insurance going forward, but now Aon is going to pick that up. Is that correct?
Aon is putting together a proposal for us, and perhaps Deanna can.
So that's so putting together a proposal. They haven't confirmed that they're picking it up. Okay, that's pretty important.
Well, we've signed a brokerage deal with Aon. Well, we've appointed them as a broker for this year, so that they can go to the market and then ask for proposals for us on our behalf.
I see. Okay. So at the moment we're done. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll go with the presentation and then we can ask questions afterwards. So thank you very much. I see you online there, Deanna and Sally. So welcome, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Tanya, have you got the presentation there, or do you want me to share my screen?
You could share it, please.
Okay, not a problem.
We all have a copy, but it's always helpful if you could put it up on the screen.
Okay, that's fine. Bear with me. Hopefully this is going to show up okay. Okay, you can all see that at the moment.
Yep.
Right, so I'm Deanna McDonald. I'm the National Client Relationship Manager with Aon's Local Government Risk Practice Group, and with me is Sally Parker, your Account Manager based out in Dunedin. We presented to you last year following the renewal, and we're just giving you an update of where things are currently at. So what we will do is go through and look at, we'll pass on those because I've just introduced us. We'll look at the markets, give you an overview of where the markets are currently sitting, talk about your values, go through what's happening with the renewals and a little bit on the emerging risks. So at the moment, the market. Now, we talked about this last year and it's continuing. So we've had a hard market for the past nearly 7 years now, and that has predominantly been focused around the secondary natural catastrophe disasters or your weather events. Whereas the market previously was focused on the earthquake losses, because they are your large single losses that will affect large scale, big numbers. Whereas your weather events tend to be happening more frequently, and they are an attritional loss to your program. So the insurers are starting to make sure that they understand these better. And whereas 6-7 years ago, you would go across to see the markets in London and they would be more, as I say, more focused on the earthquake. But now you go across and they will undertake their own loss modelling for flood. So they're looking at the attritional losses to see where those losses are, what are the weak points, and understand where you are putting the resilience into your market and into your program, looking after your assets in that respect. So as the market progresses, we are finding that at the moment insurance is starting to flatten out a wee bit. So it's not quite as hard as it has been. There are more markets coming in wanting to be able to provide capital. Now, as much as we have had the likes of Cyclone Gabriel, the Northland, Auckland and Coromandel events, that has proved to be challenging more so on the local markets than it is on the global markets. Now, all the New Zealand insurers are owned offshore, so it doesn't matter what the event is, they will be all looking around the globe, focusing on all the weather events. But there's questions that they've been asking around what's going in to looking after your perils, and I just noticed a spelling mistake on there, so I apologise. But looking after your perils, looking after your assets, how are you rating those perils according to your assets? So what loss modelling are you doing to be able to understand what's going to be affecting them? How are you building your river management assets up to what level of event? So looking at the market in the Pacific region, we can see that New Zealand at the moment is still relatively challenged in the local market. We can see that the pricing is about 10% and capacity is constrained. Now, this is generally on an overview. We're looking at the likes of coverages, still relatively stable, which is good, but the underwriting is rigorous. So as I explained, they're looking at doing the flood loss modelling. They're trying to understand what it is you're doing around your assets, building in that resilience. If we look at the different types of policies, your automobile, so your commercial motor vehicle, is generally moderate, depending, and this is looking at, they're now taking into more effect of the likes of your accumulation,
Can I just quickly check what slide number are you on?
Oh, sorry, we are up to slide 8.
We haven't moved for a while.
Yeah, we just got the slides aren't moving. You're right, the slides aren't moving on screen.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry.
Fantastic.
Here we are.
Yep.
That's better? Okay. So the we're looking at the automobile, and that is now moderate. They're looking at accumulations. So for the likes of the Auckland flooding, where you had car yards of lots of fairly expensive motor vehicles, and they had some pretty major losses going on there. And when it comes to councils, what are you doing with your fleet? Are they going home at night, or are they stored in a yard? Is it locked? What are they doing as far as looking after the fleet in that respect? Because if you had a flood, where are the accumulations going to be? So they like to understand that, and are you using the right type of vehicle for your work that is being done? So you're not taking a little Yaris out onto the river flats, for example. It's making sure you're utilising the right vehicle. The liability market, well, we said it's moderate there. This came back a couple of months ago, so I apologise, but it's actually very challenging after the last couple of weeks. And I will go into that a bit more later. As far as the cyber market, that's softening, so that's looking better. Directors and officers doesn't affect yourselves, that is more into the likes of your CCOs, etc. Property market is challenging, but it's starting to come back. That's challenging in the New Zealand market. Overseas, it is getting better, as I say. Just a general overview on the New Zealand market. This is a slide from the Insurance Council in New Zealand, just showing you what is going on. That in 2022, there were a number of weather events that went throughout the year, but we had an annual total of $351 million of insured losses. This is domestic, commercial, corporate, including council. Whereas last year we had the three main weather events at the start of the year, and we had 3.8 billion of insured losses. So hopefully, touch wood, we're not going to be having that amount of losses this year. So as an overview, the January 1st, 2024 treaty renewals for the insurance market went relatively smoothly. The reinsurers, so the insurers go off and reinsure, reinsure, etc. So they were starting to find their books were getting more profitable, and they were building up capital, which normally happens when your interest rates are looking more favourable. So greater availability of capacity, and they were looking at opening their books up to be able to spend, allowing people come in and invest. As we say, the insured losses from natural catastrophes were at an elevated level, and reinsurance on other lines were relatively flat. Are there any questions on that before we move on?
Nicole?
Just one question. You're probably aware that some of the underwriters are taking a more aggressive approach with regional councils, and you talked about maintenance of assets. You're probably aware that it hasn't become public that a couple of councils are in a litigation process, and I guess that's a concern for councils that if it's not a united front. And
yes, we understand that. Unfortunately, when it comes to the likes of the litigation against regional council or any council, to be honest, they are seen as a bottomless pit of money, which is obviously not the case, and they're the last man standing because we have joined several in New Zealand, so it doesn't help in that respect. So yes, the underwriting is taking note of all those sorts of things of how you, as I mentioned, protection of your assets. Okay, Sally, would you like to talk through the current program?
Absolutely. So I handle the day-to-day running of the general program that excludes the infrastructure program and the National Local Government Liability Program, which is handled out of Hamilton. So it's currently due 1st of November, and I'm starting to look at the renewal process now, 1st of July. So here's just a snapshot of your current covers and your total declared values. So I'll just touch on a few items of note. So your material damage policy, so that's your bricks and mortar, your contents, your building, your pump stations. So there was an 8% increase in the total declared value last year. Last year we did have a look at excess options for you in regards to going from a standard deductible of $1,000 to $10,000, which only saw a minimal saving of about $4K per annually. So this coverage does include natural disaster and accidental loss or damage. Commercial motor vehicle, as Dee's touched on, great result last year. We saw quite a considerable reduction in premium, and that was due to the insurer's appetite for council business. So I think we saw an approximate 9K saving from last year. We did also look at deductible options for you as a further saving, but that would only was about 3K, so it was quite nominal. Claims wise on your material damage, minimal claims, and also on your motor vehicle. For the last 4 years, you've been running at about 17K annually. I would like to just touch on the rural assets and the dwellings, and I have had conversations with the team about this. So basically, we handle some of the rural assets and farms owned by Environment Southland, but not all of them, which means we don't have an overview on what's currently insured by the lessee on behalf of the council. So we don't know whether they've got adequate cover in place. Discussions have been had at renewal meetings about changing that so we can have a bit of buying power for the lessees, so it would be a win situation. On the material damage and on the rural assets, Environment Southland has also undertaken valuations. So we've got adequate, clean data for the insurers, which is really great. So we're on our second desktop review of that. So that will be coming through on renewal. So you're seeing the inflationary increases going through. You've got your personal accident policy there. So we have had discussions with our health and benefits team, and discussions have been had around a more bespoke undertaking on that. And I think that's still being had, but that's not in my realm, so I'm not overly familiar with that. Generally, your specialised monitoring and your marine are just ticking over. You've added more equipment and a new vessel, so that's seen an increase there. We do, and I know Deanne is going to touch on the liability, and it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment in regards to marsh and capacity. And as Tanya mentioned, we are working on the GLPL, Harbour Masters and environmental impairment for you. Those that fall out of Marsh's program, which is the Employers Statutory and Crime, would be looking at including these within the National Liability Program if successful. And then it would be all combined on the 1st of November, which would be great. I think that's all I have. Deanna?
Yeah. Thanks, Abby.
Yes.
It's probably more something for the Audit and Risk Committee to look at, but to pick up on something I heard the other day is that it appears that we are insuring dwellings on some of our properties, but not all of them. And I think that is something that needs to be, it should be consistent. It's probably more economically viable, but I'm understanding some of the lessees are paying. And if we don't have a consistent policy, I think that is a risk, and it's something that should be followed up on.
So I think there might be a couple of actions coming out of this paper. So I'm just going to put that one down at the moment, and then we'll make sure we have action list at the end. So thank you for that, Nicole. I think there's a couple more slides to go. Is that right, Deanna? Do you want to?
Yes, we'll zoom through those for you. I know you want to keep to time, so. Okay, I just wanted to touch on the holistic risk map. We did this during our forums, and we talked about the insurable risks. So within council, you have about 30% of your overall risks that are insurable, whereas there's about 70 that are uninsurable. And it's just making sure that you're getting an understanding of what it is that you can insure and what you can't insure. Obviously, the likes of land use and pavements and retaining walls and all those sorts of things cannot be. Your roads, that's with your funding through Waka Kotahi, and there's various other things. So it's understanding what you can and can't do, and it's that full risk overview. So it's just a brief idea, something we can talk through more with the group if need be.
certainly when I went to that slide myself, I thought I was trying to understand it because I could tell that there was some usefulness in it. But,
Yes.
just trying to understand. Okay,
Yeah, it does take a bit to talk through, but
yeah.
we can do that at another time. Now, we had talked previously about, and I've spoken with the team about doing an insurable risk workshop, which we were hoping to do at some stage. So we'll look at doing that in the near future. Looking at deductible levels, these are something that we can work on to make sure that we're sitting at the sweet spot for what's right for council with the balance sheet. Obviously, asset selection, working through checking that the likes of that you've got those farm properties on the schedule if that's what you want to do or not. How the business is going to react within an event and what it's going to do to the bottom line. We can look at doing something along that line. And then the personal accident versus group life health benefits. What's the benefit to the business in that respect? And a cyber analysis. So there's different things that we can look at to make sure that your levels are sitting correctly for each of your policies within your program.
Thank you. I think now I'll open it up to the floor just in terms of questions. Tanya, if you would like to make a comment.
I don't want to get ahead of anybody, but Diana, could you give us an update on are there any issues with all the number of councils in New Zealand who were with Marsh now looking for cover at this late stage?
Okay, so Marsh, I can't speak for Marsh because obviously that's their bag, that's fine. We have been approached by a number of councils that have been involved with the Marsh program previously to try and obtain a quote for cover from effective 30th of June. We have 11 councils that we are the main broker for, that are our main priority that we get cover for as of 30th of June, because Marsh have advised them their cover stops as of that date. We have secured a primary layer of 15 mil out of our main insurer in New Zealand at the moment, so that is fine. We are just finalising the wording on that, and then we are working with the London markets, but that will not happen. They will not provide any confirmation till after 30 June as to what is going to happen in that excess layer market, because they want to get the finalising of that primary layer before they start working through, because they are on both the Marsh program and on the Aon program, and it's just checking where they fit in with these new councils. So they will advise post 30 June on that excess layer, but the 15 million primary layer is in place. We have not, we will get the information out to the councils in the next few days. We're just finalising, as I say, the wording with the lead market.
So Tanya, in my head, just from this entire presentation, I've got two sort of buckets. One is short term around probably Marsh, and then the second one is long term around what is our insurance strategy in terms of coverage. So we just cover that first one in terms of Marsh and what risk exists at the short term. Is that at a certain date, cover will stop, and can you just explain that to us really clearly and succinctly, so we know where we're at and what path to get us?
I'll back to Diana about that. So as I said, we've signed a brokerage consent, and Diana's using words that I'm not familiar with. So I was going to ask her to explain what the primary layer means.
So Diana, can I just ask, can you explain to us very, very simply and clearly just what we need to know in terms of our potential risks in front of us, and what actions need to be taken by who, by what day?
Okay, all right. So at the moment, we talk about primary, the way the market is, the program is made up within the Aon program. We have two layers. So we secure a $15 million layer to start with. So each, you have a professional indemnity, public liability, two programs or policies, both up to $15 million individually for Environment Southland. We then normally buy an excess layer above that, which encompasses all the councils that we purchase liability insurance for, which goes up to a higher level. Now, at the moment, we will sort the excess layer out later. We need to make sure we get that primary layer in place for you as of 30 June. We're just finalising that now for you.
So Deanna, looking at our total insurance currently, 15 million would cover most of it, except harbour master and environmental impairment. So with Marsh, we have, basically, we're part of a group. So you're suggesting that we'll get our $15 million, which will cover public liability and professional indemnity.
Mhm.
And then after that, we'll be part of a group of general liability. Is that what you're after 1st of July? Well, because we'll have a bigger pool. Is that what you're saying?
So you purchase, as much as we purchase it as a group, you will have your own individual policy for 15 million. That is yours.
I understand that, but in addition, if we want to
In
go to-
addition, then you purchase a group layer above that 15 million. Just as far as the harbour masters go, that will be a separate policy again, because the underwriters for the Aon program feel that that is a specialised policy, which is why they put it in and make sure that you get the exact cover that you need.
So just looking around the table, out of interest of time, so Deanna and Tanya, we're going to assign you to go away and work on this and to fix it and make sure it's done. So in terms of when actions need to happen by, so am I right in saying by the 30th of June, someone somewhere needs to sign a bit of paper? Is that right, Deanna, by 30th of June?
Yes, we will have everything in place by the 27th of June.
Okay, great. So that's going to be an action for Tanya to go away and liaise on that, and then I'll probably keep in touch out of this with Amy in terms of actions. So thank you very much for that. And then the last one was picking up on Nicole's point earlier, which was on the rural assets. There were a number of pieces in here that you talked about in terms of ways we could manage our insurance and our insurance strategy. So in the interest of time, I'm actually going to ask staff to go away and think about that and come back to us at the next committee about our strategy for insurance, what we're covering, why, and this will feed into the next 12 months' time, and I'm sure it'll take us that long to think about it anyway. There was a number of points they had on this slide that we should be considering.
Just picking up on the signing, because it's Matariki, it needs to be signed on the 27th.
27th, there we go. Okay.
Chair, can I just advise around the buildings that we don't insure? We have had this discussion probably for a couple of years. Last year, Sally, we had those buildings revalued.
Yep.
So, well, all of them actually, all the rural ones. So we know what we want to insure. And we get copies of insurance certificates from the lessees.
Okay.
So we do know what they are insuring.
Great.
We could still look at further if there is, you got to the question, is there a benefit to either or?
So,
Oh, we can hear you now.
Right, there we are.
Right,
We can
there
hear
we
us.
are.
Fantastic. We're back. Right. We paused and waited until our technical issues got sorted, so we will carry on. Alistair, did you want to ask a question?
at what point do we come to self-insurance?
That's a very good question.
Because insurance premiums are creeping up all the time.
Yes.
So I think it's a
To
great.
certain extent, but Tony can probably explain that to you.
I was just going to say, councillor, that the work has been done in the past and can't remember the exact date, it was 2011 or 2018 now, but I think it's probably been done periodically. Interestingly, the one I read in 2011 asked the same questions: excess premiums going up, difficult to get insurance, et cetera, and the review at that time was exactly that question: should we be self-insuring? And the outcome from that was no, but they were building reserves, disaster reserves, towards the fact that they felt they may not be able to get insurance in the future. Now, 11 years later, we can still be insured, but what's happening with Marsh suggests that there's going to be changes. And I know other councils are not able to insure forestry, for example. So it will be, and Deanna can answer better, but it does look like it will continually become challenging. What good a client we are, I suppose, has a bit to do with it, and the ability to amalgamate, what is it, Deanna, diversify the risks within the group.
Amy, do you want to touch?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to the point that Andrew made before, I think that's what the insurance strategy needs to answer, and it'll always be a tension, and it needs to link into what our appetite is for holding particular amounts of risk in particular places, diversification, managing those tensions between what's happening out there, what our financial positioning is, and our risk appetite, just balancing all of that. But that's what we're asking everybody to go away and come back with for the next meeting, a plan for that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your presentation today. It's been a very good discussion, and I think we're going to continue it at our next committee meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nick will move and Phil to second. Those in favour?
Aye.
It's moved. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, I think we should. Yeah. So we're going to move to health and safety next, which is item number 99.4 on page 54. And we'll take our tea break probably afterwards. So I'd like to welcome Paul. So thank you very much for the paper, Paul. I've got it in front of me now. It's your regular health and safety report. I know you're a busy person, and I'll let you just do a brief summary.
Right. Thank you very much. I take it the report is read. I just need to make one clarification and note. In the report itself, there's an error with on the dashboard, incident dashboard. It references 3 other incidents. It's actually meant to be 2. So please note that as a
On page 59.
correction on that report. So in terms of the report, the committee did ask a couple of questions at the last meeting. One is around giving some more information around our speeding events, which is now in the report. There's also the question around the hazard of harassment, and that I think I've covered in the report adequately. And then the third piece was to provide the audit from our auditor, so that's Robin Bennett from Added Plus, the full audit report that has been attached to the document. As far as incidents and so on go, I think the only thing of note in the report is about the number of medical treatments we had over the last quarter, and that is fairly unusual for us. So from an organisational perspective, we are keeping an eye on those medical treatments. Most of them are on the strain and sprain category, with a couple of sort of minor cuts and so on that need to be sorted out. Right, happy to take any questions.
Paul, when I look at this fleet number of kilometres travelled, is that in the 12-month period?
No, that's for that quarter. for the quarter.
for a quarter, so we're doing 227,000 Ks in a quarter.
Mhm.
When you're saying that we're getting speeding in excess of 10 Ks, is that for 30 seconds, the whole day, or what?
No, so it's a limited time period for an event. So an event is recorded as less than 250 meters or less than, I'm not exactly sure of the timing, but I think it's about 25 seconds.
And that'll be a similar sort of thing for a plus 20K.
Yes, that's when it records that event, yes.
How many tickets are staff getting from the law enforcement?
As far as I know, we haven't received any over that quarter.
Interesting. How many accidents?
None.
And you just wanted to,
Yeah,
When we say
so,
accidents, I just need to just clarify that. It doesn't mean vehicle damage, so we've had vehicle damage,
Yeah, just
but
the
we
entity.
haven't had a vehicle accident.
Yep.
I just, in terms of the ticketing, question, just like to probably make a couple of points about the way in which the system works in terms of, and where we can see where some of the speeding incidents are happening, and often it's about a change of speed zone, but there's often the right word escapes me, what's it called, like a tolerance limit either side of those, like a buffer limit either side of the what do you call it, Paul? Like in terms of the error distance, that might, it's not geofencing.
No, yes, yeah. So there's a tolerance in the system itself of 10 k's per hour. So that's that from 100 to 110. So that won't record an event. Anything beyond 110, that's when it starts recording
I
events. in the
was
system.
thinking more about the distance in between
Oh,
around the speed signs and
yes, yeah.
the
So
speed
sessions.
zones.
Yes,
Sessions.
yes, yeah. So if you look at the data, so the vehicle will, once it hits any one of those thresholds, it'll record an event. But you could have several events in a session, and the session is usually where they don't necessarily drop speed at all, so they keep at that speed. So the session, once it starts recording over 250 meters, it will record another event, it will record another event, so it will record another event. That is the testament of where we say, right, that particular individual has been speeding for a longer period of time over a longer distance, and that's the area of concern.
But there's also around a speed sign, for example, like going from a 80k zone into a 50k zone. When, is there a ring around that in terms of distance?
Well,
Or is it like, so it's just
our
like
system hits it as
zero?
soon as you hit the sign.
Yep.
If you're over the 10 kilometer threshold, it pings an event.
Do you look at it from the other angle? In other words, a whole lot of people are travelling at 80 Ks, what's that costing you in time and salaries? Like you're looking at overs,
Yep.
but you're not looking at unders, are you?
Well, yeah, no, we don't.
Ross,
I have a question about the audit report
Yes.
from AVID. And I read it through and there's a number of recommendations in there. But there is probably an obvious answer. Are we legally required to get an audit from an independent body to make sure that our health and safety is up to scratch? Or is this something we feel we ought to do because we all get benefit from that?
So there's no, unless we are certified in any sort of one of the ISO standards or any of the certifications, we don't require the audit to be done. So this is a voluntary audit on our part. And what it does, it gives us an opportunity to really get someone independent to have a look at our systems and give us that kind of one step out of business view of.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Mr. Chairman. It's just that this would have cost a fair bit of money, I suppose. I don't know how much, that's not important, but we have Paul, we have you here, you're a very expert in this field. A lot of the recommendations in this report referred to publicly available information from the government, which tells you what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. I'm really wondering whether or not we really need to have an independent organisation audit us. I'm sure it gives you comfort, but you're obviously very expert in this field, and I'm just wondering whether or not we can do it ourselves.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, Morris. I certainly reflected on the report as well, and certainly one of the highlight, one of the points in that report, which I'd be quite keen to hear from other councillors and yourself on, is there's a lot of work for us to do to lift the bar in some high risk areas. And what it says, under our current resourcing, we can't do it. So from a risk point of view that we're looking after, I've read this. And we've got some high risk areas in terms of health and safety that we're not managing. And staff have come to us to say, under current resourcing, they won't be able to fix it anytime soon. So I was actually going to ask the councillors, so similar, sort of vein in terms of how do we address the shortcomings?
Whether we need external expert advice for that or not is my question.
Well, and part of the other ones is actually saying, do we bring in more external help? Which yeah,
Costs money.
that's right. So I guess do we just, is our risk appetite such that we say no? And I guess that's something as a committee we need to consider. And by us reading this paper, considering it, we say whether we're comfortable with taking risks in the space or not.
And so to that point, and Paul might want to add on that, and we've talked about the use of consultancy outside of this forum, through LTP and sometimes at council. There's a couple of reasons why we use consultants. First is either for the expertise, or B, where we lack the resource capacity to do the job. I'd like to remind everybody around this table as councillors that they have a role to play in our health and safety system and structure as officers, to the extent to which they can direct the work of the organisation. And so I'd ask you the question, and I think it's to Andrew's point about the risk tolerance that you wish to have. What is the level of assurance that you could and should be having as officers in this area around what we're doing? So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yeah, go.
the follow-up from that is, will this make a difference?
It's
Yeah, look, it most certainly will make a difference, because what it's doing is, it's, me in my role and Amy in her role, we get stuck into the detail. So, this is that helicopter view, so it's looking at it holistically. It gives us some independent verification that systems are working. So, we can't constantly spend time self-assuring ourselves, because that's open to our judgment. This is taking a third-person judgment on how we are managing things. It gives us some direction on a work program, because what they see and what we see could be two different things. So it's best practice across the health and safety spectrum as such. It is best practice. And if we were to decide to go for any certification, we would most certainly feel that we are in a position to start, taking on that journey. So if we were going to go for an ISO accreditation of any sort, there's an opportunity that we will know that our system stands up to it, really, because that's what you would suggest.
Amy first and then Nicole.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to bring it back to us. We can talk about the health and safety system and we can talk about audit reports, but actually what matters at the end of the day is what people are doing or not doing, and the outcomes that it might have for them or other people, and about making sure that our people go home in one piece and that we're protecting the people that we work with and the broad public as well. Because when it doesn't happen, when it doesn't go well, people have life-altering events, and in small communities those ripple out. So sometimes I think it's easy to lose sight of that when we're talking about reports, but actually fundamentally that's what having a good health and safety program and having people doing what they should be doing delivers us at the end of the day.
Just a small point on the first aid and fire extinguisher checks. I've never actually seen one in my car, so if it's there somewhere and I don't know where it is, it's a small risk. And if I'm not covered, well, I suppose I'm replaceable. So we might just check on that and just.
I'll most certainly make a check on your vehicle.
Also, did you have? Did you have a point?
Yeah, I think that it's probably quite a good point that I just asked you a few questions very quickly and I knew your health and safety was working. Because I have been in vehicles with an old granddad that sits back there that only goes along at 80 k's an hour. What's that costing us? You know, to go that slowly and, you know, if you're in private enterprise, you won't be going at that speed because you'll be making some money somewhere.
Yeah, you know, look, I don't have the evidence in front of me to say that you know, all of our vehicles are driving 20 k's below the speed limit. I would suggest most of our vehicles are pretty much at the speed they should be going. So, and you know, it's quite easy to get that information if we needed it. But I would suggest that, you know, our vehicles are. You know, I've never heard of anyone complaining about us going too slowly.
Paul, can I ask? So just back to the speeding and those numbers that you put in. Because when I read them in terms of the numbers that are over 10 or over 20, it did seem like quite a few. I guess it's sort of a matter of opinion. So then my mind went back to the place of just saying, are those staff told as their regular reporting to the staff and oversight in terms of it goes to the manager or some exec? So that, because it's around behaviour, I know some of it will be legitimised because of the scenario, but still I think people are aware that can.
Yeah. Yep. So you know, it gets reported monthly through to the executive. So the executive does have a view of it. What we are currently working on is actually creating the system to generate monthly reports that will go out to the divisional managers. It's just there's a little quirk in the system that I'm just trying to figure out just to get that report out.
And the individual staff themselves?
So no, it doesn't actually go to the individual staff themselves because you know, the staff are being warned and alarmed in the vehicle themselves, so they know that they've had that event. However, if we do pick up, so for example, I use an example where we had a student that was traveling out towards Te Anau, and you know, we were getting, myself and my colleague were getting pinged every sort of 10 minutes with a speeding event from this particular individual. You know, we responded immediately, went to the manager, said, okay, you need to contact this person, find out why they are racing to get to wherever they need to race to, and get them to slow down. And we then had a discussion with that individual after, you know, once they got back. So once we noticed a pattern, or we noticed that they've gone for an extended period of time, so they've gone beyond those 250 meters or the time period, so they're hitting maybe having 2 events or actually triggering a session, that's when the opportunity is to have a conversation with the individual. And usually we take it to the manager or to their team lead and let them have that conversation.
Okay. I wonder, so just in the health and safety reports coming next quarter, if we just have an update on the speeding events and just how things are progressing, because I think it is as a high risk area.
So you're more or less telling us that we do 1 million kilometres a year.
Just under 800 and something thousand k's a year.
Yeah.
And it's quite seasonal, so you know, you'll see over the summer months a bit more versus the winter months.
Right. And lastly from Morris.
I'm ready to move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman. I've been reading through the follow-up from the event report, and looks like you've got that in hand, which is good. So I presume we'll get a report on it in the future on the progress made in that area.
And so just to check before we second it, as those critical risks, the high risks from the external audit, you will keep presenting back to us in the paper?
Yes. Yeah.
Because one of my concerns is that you've highlighted here that you will not be able to progress those because of a lack of resource, and that us around this committee table need to consider that further about how we address that.
Yeah,
The staff have highlighted to us a risk, and we need to deal with that, but we will make sure that's on the next agenda. Okay.
So
Okay, so that's moved by Morris and seconded by
I'll do it.
Alistair. Thank you. Or
You need to add those things in that you mentioned.
those two, do we add the
So we can
couple of actions?
pick them up as the action plan is to report against speeding and to continue to update report and progress against closing out the actions of the audit. Yep.
Great. So moved by Morris, seconded by Alistair. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Moved. Thank you very much, Paul. If you would like to stay there, we will just have those actions.
Yep,
And
I've
move
got
to
those.
your
Line of remote.
108.
deep dive, and then we'll take our tea break.
Yep.
So I'm just getting the page numbers. Page 108.
Okay, so I take the report as read. So this we did our deep dive in is looking at the new loan and remote working. As you are most people aware, that we do cover a very large geographical area with some of the most remote areas in the country. Our staff are working in anything from an industrial site to a farm to a remote forest to all the way into Fiordland, doing various bits and pieces remotely. Most of our controls are based on either technology, training and supervision, or some equipment and so on that's available to our staff to use. Obviously the risk is very much considered by our teams, very aware of the risk, and most certainly the utilization of some of our tools is very well utilized and used. So, and I think there's always a good sense of, because based on the kind of people that we are recruiting and employing, they do have a general good sense of what remote working is like, and they do bring a personal experience to this particular scenarios that they find themselves in. So happy to take questions.
Alistair.
How long after, like, you've got somebody's been away and they've said they're going to be back at 5 o'clock? Normally they'll push a button and you'll see they're there. How long does it take you, the system, to pick up that they're not there?
So it's immediate. So it starts alarming as soon as if someone misses an alarm or misses a check-in time, it alarms immediately.
And that comes back into
reception. It'll go to the people manager, and if it's after hours, it'll go to our after hours service.
Thank you.
If you were to run an exercise, what would be kind of the scenario that represents the worst case?
So one thing that we really need to test is someone actually setting off a Garmin device, so setting off the alarm on the Garmin device, which is an immediate SOS call to the emergency operations center. It actually goes via America to our center, and to make sure that is working, and then obviously to ensure our response is adequate. So that's the scenario I'd like to run.
In what sort of context? Like, are we thinking like at a public meeting in Gore or on a remote site in Milford?
No, I'd like to really test it in a remote site. So somewhere, we've got mountains, we've got trees, just to really test that GPS capability. So it's reliant on GPS signaling. So that's where I'd like to test it.
Thank you very much for your paper, Paul. I know that I just sort of see effectiveness of existing controls. The application of these controls differs across the divisions. Work is being undertaken to improve the controls, ensure there's consistency. So sort of, I guess, getting back to my previous point of, we are trying to raise the bar. It's going to be the time and space and resource to do that. There's nothing else. There's a mover.
Happy to move.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Seconded by Phil. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Moved. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.
Good one.
All right. We will take a tea break for 15 minutes. So for all those online, we will go offline for 15 minutes and then come Is that he? Yeah, yeah, and then we'll come back at 22. Thank you.
Finish last year? No, because when you changed it, took it off the whole meeting. What?
We said we are not on
Wait,
mute.
wait, on mute.
Okay.
Yes, on it.
Fantastic, so we are now back live and streaming. Back from our break, okay. Thank you, we have everyone seated. So we're now moving on to our next agenda item, which is 9.8, our LTP update from Dave. Page 169 of our pack. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just like to note a couple of updates to the items that was submitted, just with the movable piece that the long-term plan is. Just in the summary that we've had an additional deliberation this morning, so 19th of June. And following that, in terms of audit and then the timeline, that has been adjusted slightly. But what you get in the background is the process to which we've come to the end of the deliberations and then what comes next in terms of audit. So we have, as staff, got changes to make, and then we'll be providing all documents and supporting information to audit tomorrow. Just wanted to note that the audit time frame is going to be confirmed tomorrow morning. Ideally, we are meeting with the auditors following today's deliberations, and the timeline is dependent on the allocated resources required by the auditors, and that is due to them when they set the timing, noting, and this is based on previous experience, that they were assuming immaterial changes to the documentation. So since our consultation and subsequent hearings and deliberations, there have been more than just immaterial changes to the documents, and therefore audit may require more resource, which they hadn't banked on needing, hence why we will get a better idea tomorrow about what it is that is required from audit and be able to come back with a more solid timing in terms of the end date of audit and then the flow on from that to adoption. Yeah, I guess in terms of a note in terms of risk is around the timing of adoption of the long-term plan. It is, we will not be able to meet the statutory deadline of 30 June, and detailed in the item is what the breach, what that means. In terms of, I guess, the discussions that have happened to date throughout the hearings and the process with council, I believe there was discussion around their timing and also the acknowledgement of the importance of the process to go through and undertake as part of the long-term plan. Just so lastly, I'll just come to the timeline. As I said, there's a few updates required. So the two options that we're working to, dependent on the auditor feedback, are adoption on the 10th of July or the 17th of July. We'll be able to come back to council as soon as we get more information.
Thank you very much, Dave. And yes, I was informed that the statutory deadline, I believe that people are aware of it before today, and everyone's been thoroughly involved in the LTP process. So thanks for the full update. Any questions from Dave?
So we were due, Dave, weren't we, to finalise that off on the 26th, is it?
So that was, so the time frame has changed a little bit. So due to, I guess, when we got into the non-submissions that came in and the hearings deliberations required, it was originally the 26th.
Yeah, and then it was finalised on the 10th.
Then it's suggested to be the 10th of July. Just suggesting now that there's still, it could be either the 10th of July or 17th of July, depending on what we hear from the auditors in terms of their requirements.
And I'm on holiday then, so that'll be just the way it goes.
All right, any other questions? No? All right, who would like to move? Thank you, Phil. Second, thank you, Nicole. In favour? Aye. Next, moved. Thank you very much, Dave.
Gee, that was easy.
Fantastic. All right. So we're now moving to agenda item 9.9 with Tanya. If you'd like to come forward, the internal audit report, of which we will have PwC join us. Who are our internal auditors. So they are online. And just welcome. There we are. Welcome, good to see you online. All right. So Tanya, would you like to just move to page number 172?
Firstly, I'll take the report as read. My information within the report is merely an overview to remind the committee of what we've been working on, and we have Juanita from PwC joining us to talk to their final report from our first audit, very exciting, which was Dominic, procurement and contract management.
So just like to remind the committee that this is our first internal audit report, which is fantastic. It is definitely one of our key tools in our toolbox, and we specifically asked them to go away and look at an important area within the organisation for us. So it's quite an important report that they have provided back, and one that from a governance point of view we can get a lot out of. So next steps, Dominic, would you like to, or should we ask Juanita to provide an overview?
Yeah, then we can introduction from Juanita.
Yep. Right. So just everyone, we've got Juanita online, who's the audit, who's the partner from PwC. If you'd like to just give a brief overview, and then we can possibly ask some questions.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present this report to you today. So as mentioned, this is really the first internal audit report, so also keen to get any feedback that you may have. So as part of the pack that we've provided, we're really keen to give you a status update of the internal audit plan. We also, you'll see in the pack that there's also a tracking sheet where our intention is and our aim is to really track the open items that we are reporting so that we can also provide feedback to the committee just as these matters are being closed. And then lastly, I'll just also highlight some of those key themes that we have seen when we had a look at the procurement and the contract management. So firstly, if you have a look at the progress against the plan, so we finalized the first audit, which was procurement and contract management. We have also since made very good progress on the asset management one. We've basically completed planning, and the team is currently actually there in Invercargill, busy on the ground with the field work. And the next two planned reviews would be on the accounts payable and accounts receivable, and then on the cybersecurity as well. And we'll shortly start with a planning on those two areas. When we look at the action management and the tracking, I just thought to include it as part of this report, but we haven't really looked at those areas that have already been closed by management, but it just gives you a flavor as to what it would look like going through to the next round as well. So I won't really spend a lot of time there. And then really just keen to provide a little bit of an overview of the procurement and contract management report. So overall, the objective of this internal audit was looking at the design of the processes and controls in place in this space. And some of the key themes that we've identified was when we look at it from an overall perspective, there is some good practices in place, but it's largely very decentralized, and the maturity is low to emerging. So some of the good things that we have seen is people are aware that there is a delegation of authority. They are, from the sample that we've selected, they were following the delegated authority. So that's really good to see from a procurement perspective. And I guess when we looked at the different types of contracts, because we really try to look at small expenses up to the much bigger expenses, and it was really good to see that as the complexity and as the scale of the expenditure increases, the robustness of the control also increases. So it's really risk-based when you look at that perspective. Some of the key areas that we did, however, find where more focus can be paid is first just looking at procurement from a more strategic perspective. So as part of our analysis, we did a little bit of data analytics just to explore kind of what the procurement looks like at the council. And we saw that there was really a large number of suppliers. There was a large number of transactions, even transactions below $500. And therefore, there's just an opportunity to streamline, and it can also be a reflection if we think about it from the decentralized approach. But yes, there's that opportunity to really have a central support or just oversight as well from a strategic procurement perspective. And then also on just being more proactive when it comes to procurement planning and aligning that to the annual plan and the long-term plan, and really making sure that we spend the expenditure aligned with that plan and do that proactive planning as to where we will be spending the money available. When we had a look at the documented policy and documented manual, it was clear that there was a manual. Yes, the manual and the policy should be refreshed, because the last time, I think it was revisited in 2019 and 2022 respectively. But what we have seen is it's quite a lengthy document. So in order to simplify it and to really make it fit for purpose for council, it should be revisited. And I guess it's also more about, yes, it's good to have the documented policy in place, but it's all about raising awareness to the staff members and providing them with adequate training so that they really understand what is expected from them. That was really lacking when we had a review of that. Similarly, we saw there's a number of contractual templates that's available to staff, and it's good to have templates available. But again, it's simplifying maybe the number of templates available and really providing that guidance to the staff as to when which template should be used, and also when they can actually obtain legal advice if there is nuances that other supplier wants to change within the contracts, or whether that's maybe not an area that should be up for negotiation. Another area that we had a look at was just the overall contract management practices. And there we saw there's not really a contract register to make sure that you have a big overview as to which contracts have you entered into, and basically ensuring that you also monitor spend in terms of the contract, the managing expiry dates, and thinking ahead whenever they have to be renewed, in order to start the tender process maybe early on and not really have to extend maybe a contract for another term if that was not what your intention was in that space. So it's really all about just bringing the controls forward, formalizing controls a little bit more, and making sure that those practices are in place on a proactive basis. And then another area that we had a look at was whenever management go through a procurement process and there is that evaluation process, there is just inconsistent levels of retaining evidence of whether it's due diligence performed or whether it's just a kind of considering all the risks within the process. So we've identified there a number of recommendations that management can take on board. Some of the controls that we have also seen is that there's a number of manual controls currently in place. There is purchase orders aren't consistently used. There's no three-way matching. Now, all of these controls are really great controls in a procurement environment. But what we have seen that management are doing is there is segregation of duties, and there is that one-up approval or that delegated authority level that do mitigate some of the risk to an extent. But I mean, some of these other controls would really ensure that the procurement process is even more robust, and there's the sense checking of information, and yes, it would just make the whole environment a little bit more mature. So basically, that was really just a very high-level overview of some of those areas that we've identified. And overall, management has agreed to action plans, and the action plan date ranges from basically now up until March 2025 for some of those actions that will be taken by management. And that's a brief overview from my end, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for that overview. It was a very detailed report, which was great to get all the numbers, both in terms of the analysis of transactions that have gone through, and also, more importantly, the gaps that we've got. Any questions to start with? Nicole?
Well, thank you very much for the report, and I did find page 178 of the executive summary fairly confronting, that the positives are the recommendations to go forward. We need more transparency, we need more efficiency, we need more consistency, and I think a lot of those things that you've identified them, once we know that they're there, we can do something with. So no, it's a very comprehensive report, and very happy to read the positive stuff going forward, what we should do next.
Boris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question about the procurement manager position. So from what I read, it seems like there is a vacancy there that hasn't been filled, and did we have one in the past? And if this recommendation is to proceed, what benefits do you see? It's described in here, obviously, but perhaps we can hear it from you guys. What an advantage that having a dedicated procurement manager would bring to the council?
Okay. Firstly, for answering that question, I'd just like to acknowledge the efforts from Juanita and her team and their Environment Southland team that were involved in completing this audit. It's not very often you go from a draft audit to a final audit report without fiercely debating some points or making some wholesale changes. In this situation, it was just minor tweaks that we made to some of the wording, and that was a reflection of the quality, the conduct of the audit, but also, and it's noted on that executive summary, the approach and the enthusiasm that was applied, and the honesty from the staff involved, which led us to a position where the report, we were in agreement with pretty much everything that came out of that. So the position you're talking about is within one of the key priority items within the action plan. We have attempted to get a role that had a procurement focus a couple of times in the recent past, and we've been able to secure somebody in there. So it is absolutely been on our front of mind to try that we need to get some sort of focus, dedicated focus in the procurement space. The advantage of that, and you will need to touch on a little bit, is there's a genuine intent from the business to try and follow the process, do the right thing. What's missing is that key person to come to, or that key area to help guide them in terms of procurement, to provide the oversight in terms of procurement, and to set the foundations for which some of the ongoing training and education that would go on in the space as well. In the last sort of 3 years, I think, I don't know, 40 or 50% of the staff are less than 3 years within this organisation, and so in the past we may have had a lot of this knowledge there, but now it's in the time we've failed to have this position, we've lost some of that momentum, and so for that reason, the contract register, and form of resourcing it right up the front.
Can I just clarify? So the vacant procurement manager role, is it vacant because we didn't have the budget to fill it, or is it vacant because we just haven't actioned going to the market, or because we went to the market we couldn't get somebody? I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, we've gone out a couple of times with a role that's had procurement focus in it, not a dedicated procurement manager, but had procurement manager functions within it.
Mm-hmm.
We were unsuccessful a couple of times trying to fill that, and so it was about revisiting then how do we repackage a role to try and get a bit more success going out to the market.
Great. So hopefully the current state of the market would be beneficial because there's more people on the market now. Yeah. Okay. Phil?
Just one question while I've got Juanita on the line. The final point in the executive summary was about providing guidance on social procurement expectations. Are there benchmarks or exemplars or others we could look at who have already done that to give us a sense for the range of choices or the range of guidance you could provide in that space?
Yes, we can surely share something with the management team, but ultimately it would be what the council really want to achieve when looking at those elements. So it really goes back to making it fit for purpose for Environment Southland as well, because yes, others might have great ideas, but the environment might be slightly different.
And so I guess for myself, just sort of echoing Nicole's comment earlier that reading the executive summary, it certainly says that we in this area are at a low level of maturity at the moment. We have significant work to do. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the progress in that area. And it's been great to hear that the staff worked really well with the internal auditor, because that roadmap looks fantastic. So if we can get progress on that roadmap, then that looks great. It looks very clear in terms of what we have to do and when. So I'm really pleased to have this in front of us. I know that it was mentioned earlier, just in terms of feedback, whether it's for the next internal audit and the likes. So I had 2 points. The first one was when I just saw who is going to be the owner of all the actions going forward. There's a number of recommendations, and then there's a person's name beside all those recommendations to ensure they're fixed. And I think just about all of them, absolutely all of them, have Dominic's name there. And I paused to consider that and consider what else there is to do. And I understand that the setup and the structure would belong with yourself, but I would say going forward to consider the responsibility of other staff in the organisation. And by that I mean we do have a procurement manual, and anyone who's of a management level, by being recruited into a management role, does have a responsibility to follow our policies and procedures. And they don't necessarily have to attend a training session and be ticked off for that. So I'd be very keen to make sure that everyone on the management level who's got a management word in their job description is taking responsibility in these areas, and not just for this one, but for the ones that will flow after this too. So in terms of how you manage that, Dominic and Unita, I'll let you come up with it. But I don't think it should all flow back to just one central point, because I do know if it does, it won't happen.
And maybe just to comment on the responsible person in terms of the report, that's really the person that will help drive closing the matter. So it's not that that person will be solely responsible for actioning it, because the manual and the policy does have a section for roles and responsibilities stipulating who's responsible for procurement, which is the overall business as well. So just to make sure that that is clear.
Yeah, great. And lastly, I was looking at the risk ratings and I saw some orange. I was trying to find a definition if orange was medium or high, or are we using the risk ratings from our risk management framework that we just signed off an hour ago?
Page 202.
202, fantastic.
We can surely use for the next reports, we can align them to the ratings as per the risk report.
Yes, that would probably be beneficial, Tanya, in terms of if our risk management framework ratings aligned.
Yeah, they're fairly close, because I did have a discussion with you, Anita, before this report came out. But yep, we can if that would be your preference.
It's certainly something to consider. And then, so the yellow is just moderate, so we don't actually have any high. Am I correct in that?
Yes, and I would say really the main reason for that is yes, there is a lot of work in the procurement environment, but if you have a look at the segregation of duties, the one level up approval, the fact that we haven't seen any of those samples that we selected that did not follow at least the right approval levels, that is at least a good indication of just the two core procurement controls that has to be in place. So yes, there is room for improvement for kind of documenting and making sure there is consistency, but at least in those two, we did see consistency throughout.
I'll let you consider it for the next ones, just because my 20 years looking at this space, there's some fundamentals that should have been in 10 years ago that haven't been. Contract register and the likes, but I guess that's due to the vacant role. So I just would have thought some of these might have been a bit of a higher status, but you can consider that for the next one, because it does, rating drives the action, which is really important. If it's only moderate, it won't get as much momentum on the side. Anyway, that's just my feedback. Any other questions?
Just a comment that we, on page 180, the first three targets are probably unrealistic with dates 31st of May through to the 30th of June. You know, but we action as soon as they can be, but you know, expect we're not going to get the procurement position done before in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, we're just encouraging staff to move as quickly as they can, but I don't think we can hold them for those dates up for the first three.
All right, I think we'll wrap up by saying thank you very much for a great report. Reads very well in terms of just being very clear, and thanks to all the staff being involved. It's a great first internal audit to have done. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and also just thank you from our side. Management was really cooperative as part of this review, and we really thank them for that.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Move it. Morris, and second by Phil. In favour?
Aye.
Against? No. Thank you. Right. Tanya, thank you for staying, because we're now on 9.10, which is on page 208, which is our global and domestic risk trends report, which I think had been moved out from our last committee meeting, if I remember correctly. I will let you introduce the paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take the report as read. There is quite a bit of information in there. Believe me, there was quite a bit that we left out as well. The World Economic Forum and the other risk reports that are produced on a regular basis contain, in most cases, some enlightening information. What we've done is focused on two of the key risks that all the reports looked at, and that was misinformation and disinformation. And just to clarify, most of the reports refer to artificial intelligence, the use of AI, ChatGPT, as being significant contributors to the misinformation and disinformation. And the other one, quite clearly, is environmental risk, which is high on our priority list as well. So these are topics that are being discussed reasonably regularly at the moment. We're all fairly well aware of them. We've made a couple of points on some other ones, which are the societal polarisation. And again, I think we're seeing that around New Zealand, the economic uncertainty, cyber insecurity also feeds into the artificial intelligence and the misinformation and disinformation, and rise in conflicts has been in the reports for some time. So yeah, there's some interesting information there for the councillors to digest. I'd be happy to answer any questions that people may have.
I guess sort of just setting the context for this, it's to allow us as a governance group stop and pause for a moment and think about other emerging risks which may impact this organisation. Just should we be considering these? Should we be including them on a risk register? Are we comfortable? Or is there anything else we should be doing some of these. So I guess that's the reason paper is presented to us. Amy?
And I was just going to say, so it's a heads up for this committee, given the role of this committee, but actually, and you'll see in the next year, it's an opportunity for us as a, want to take the opportunity with full council to actually have a workshop on this and to reconsider our top risks that we're doing our deep dives on. In the context of this information, just have a really good, robust discussion with everybody.
So can I just check? So that's we are looking to set up a workshop.
Yep, we can set up a workshop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tony, did you do this analysis yourself? Do you do this analysis and share it with others in other regional councils or have a similar function?
No, Paul and I have predominantly, with Amy's assistance, of course, written this report. I did reach out to other councils and some of them interesting responses. One in particular, they brought in their auditors to give them a review of the World Economic Forum report, given its complexities. And that was probably the main one. The other ones looked more domestically at what was happening. But yeah, there was only two that I could find that had actually done it recently.
I was just going to observe that recently the KPMG agribusiness agenda for 2024 was released, which even though it has an agri focus, takes a broad global perspective of, and given itself and as an economy so heavily dependent upon agriculture more so than any other region in New Zealand, there might be some additional insights that either verify or shed different perspectives.
Yep. Absolutely, thank you for that.
Yeah, I guess, we know we've got a society that are quite a bit more aggressive and angry at the moment, but I guess we need, from risk management, we need to be able to identify individuals or areas rather than have a blanket. We have to send 2 people to every place or whatever else. So it's about managing risk, I guess, and we get the odd person who's on Facebook or even on the phone pretty aggressive. If we identify the risk, we actually perhaps let's not say we're going to have 2 people all body armor to go anywhere, but just to be aware of the risks, I think. And it does get to the stage where we can't go and talk to the public. Well, I'm never going to do that, and that might be a slight risk, but it's only a very slight risk.
Morris?
I guess the misinformation pandemic is something that we could be thinking about at the staff level. We've got nearly 200 staff. We've got us here as well. I don't know whether you could monitor that in some way, but if you've got a proportion of the staff that started to believe it's something that was not right and inimical to our interests, then that could be a problem. I don't know if you could monitor that in any way, but I imagine our staff are all intelligent, sensible people, but I know we did a survey of climate change risks, and there was a proportion of staff that didn't think that it was much of an issue. So there's always that risk.
Yeah, if I can respond to that. Look, I think having worked in other organisations, I think we communicate really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the misinformation and disinformation is, I think if we look back to COVID, I still know a number of people who believe that 5G was the cause of COVID, and I would consider these people intelligent ones. I would consider them intelligent human beings. But the misinformation and disinformation just continues to build. So one of the keys, I think, is communication within the organisation, and I do think we do that well. I've sat through the committee meeting, and I know we've talked about some of the things that have come out of the LTP and how people have responded to that. But I think we've got a reasonably good handle on it. What this paper has brought to us in the international papers is just highlighting this is becoming more and more important around the world. and at least being aware of it and factoring it into our risk assessments, I think is something that we should be doing.
Sorry. Yeah, just to build on Tani's last point, actually, which is, you got, is that actually knowing and understanding that it is a risk allows us to take, consider what we do and take active countermeasures to minimise the impact of that. So rather than just assuming it's not there or acknowledging it's there, but carrying on doing what we're doing, it's like, actually, what can we do to physically ensure that we are managing for that risk? So in the case of misinformation, it's not swamping out the actual message that is based on fact or data and good decision making, like we talked about earlier in our deep dive.
I was perhaps going to observe that it's not unique to this council. Every council in Southland is confronted with this challenge, and that part of the risk is our public engagement, our ability to reach and communicate on important issues with our community. And we probably could potentially do some sharing of thinking and resources with our other councils in the region and perhaps tackle it in a collaborative approach, I think, moving forward, because there's no silver bullet to responding to this one. And but there are things where I think we can do to excuse poor choice of words, immunise our constituents to a greater degree by alerting them to the risk and the threat.
Eyes wide open.
Okay. All right, so I think there's an action that there's going to be a workshop.
Yep.
On this. That'll be a great discussion here. All the councillors involved. Thank you very much for providing this paper.
Move the report.
Very much, Morris. Seconded by Alistair. In favour?
Aye.
Against? Moved. Thank you very much, both of you. All right, we'll go to Amy's update, and then we'll get Wilma in straight after. So 9.11.
Yep.
We have our annual activity plan.
Yep, so just very briefly, as per all other committee meetings, this is just updating you on the forward work program and highlighting any changes. Clearly today we've moved forward the insurance report at the bottom of page 213, and just advising that we have finalised now the terms for the legislative compliance review, but not, or just about to start that. So that's why that's, in terms of reporting on that, that will come to the next committee. That's pretty much it.
All right, I'll move that we receive the report. Seconded by Nicole. In favour?
Aye.
Against? Moved. Thank you. Wilma, we have your report 9.2, which is on page 43 for us. One of our deep dives. Thank you for writing this paper. It's great to read. There's a bit in it. So, page 43. Here we go. One of our deep dives on our risk, effective leadership and decision making. I'll let you provide a brief overview first. You may.
Well, thank you, Chair. So the paper, of course, I'm sure we have plenty of observations about. This is a very critical part of the organisation, the decision-making, quality of decision-making in the organisation, and the support that goes into it and the processes that lead up to it and lead from it are absolutely critical to organisational performance and improvement. So this is the whole performance management ecosystem for the organisation, being the focus of the executive since it was formed in December 2022. It's a 7-year program of work that we can get to transform the business in terms of not only its support systems, but also the way we do our work, and to actually upskill the organisation, its maturity around performance reporting, and to ensure that we've got a robust governance arrangement at both the executive level and through to council, and that the appropriate levels of monitoring are in place against our budgeting, planning and strategy work. So There's it will be true to say we are only 18 months as an executive into that way of working. The executives worked at ensuring that it's got a framework for making those decisions and working through the delivery of programs around that. And I think we're clear about what an effective end product looks like, and we're on that journey at the moment. So there are important key matters to us in the delivery of that work. So happy to take questions and to make any further comments on the paper as required.
Questions from the floor?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I read this report obviously along with everything else and found plenty of other things to ask questions about, but nothing actually too specific in here.
So I think you've just seen,
Very thorough,
you've just seen, Councillor, I think, you know, the audit, the first audit that we've had, external audit, is a good example of one of the deliverables around this. The fact that we know that, you know, we should choose these by the areas of greatest risk to the organisation to enter first. So, you know, risk is certainly an area of organisational capability that we're on the maturity scale for, and we've, you know, it's been a conversation that really has been important for us as exec and gripped up, and we've had some good support for that from this committee, and the fact that council has actually seen fit to create this committee as a separate entity for focus for governance at both the executive and council level. So.
Bill.
Thank you. Wilma, do you think there's an opportunity to consider for a mentoring program internally for us? I know that often young staff members actually don't realise their potential until someone shoulder taps them or prods them. I just ensure in terms of giving greater confidence to younger folk who might grow and or step up into leadership roles in the future.
Yes.
I know it doesn't generate an immediate return, but it could be a return that others benefit from at a later date.
I think that's a very good point. One of the things that's been very critical for the organisation has been an ability to actually ensure that there is quality training, and this is, you know, we've never been a particularly we're an organisation that runs quite a lean budget, and so training has not actually been a very strong component of our budget lines in operation for some time. And when we hit COVID in 2020 and we're looking for savings in that year, really the training budget sort of got a hammering. We've been building that back up. A really critical part of that has actually been about management competency, and that flows right down through to team leader level in the organisation. And it's quite clear to us from our most recent staff survey that that's the area that needs quite a bit of support. So we're bringing it's a piece of work actually underway at the moment that's supporting the executive and will flow through the organisation to all people management players. And that should pick up actually those younger people in the business. So there's quite a structured program that we're working through now. And in the business plan that we presented during the LTP, you'll see that there is actually funding set aside in the people area around the staff competency, because it's a critical part of delivery. Staff are 50% of our organisational costs.
I guess I'm just suggesting mentoring, because knowing the resource constraints that confronts us, that can be potentially resourced internally with a relatively low cost or commitment from staff. I know there's a penalty in terms of the time it takes to have conversations with someone and form a mentoring relationship.
I think there's quite good mentoring going on actually in the organisation at the moment, but I think there needs to be more structured competency training in those spaces. Sorry, Amy.
Yeah, no, just to build on that and to build on Wilma's point and to pick up some of the things from actually audit. You know, training's also been decentralised within the organisation, so there's an opportunity to centralise that and to think much more strategically how, given that we do have, relative to the nature of the fact that we are a knowledge organisation, you know, how we get best bang for buck out of what we do have in the training budget. So just thinking about being more strategic in that, but also just acknowledging the fact that, you know, we need to have people in the organisation to be able to do their thinking and deliver that work. And I reflect back to 7 years ago when I joined, there was one person doing HR and health and safety, you know, full time, and that was it from an HR department. So we've been able to, you know, concurrently build that capability within the organisation, and looking at not just mentoring, but a variety of ways in which we can, you know, build management capacity and leadership capacity as well.
Cool.
Yeah, just reflecting on your comments on culture, and culture is not something you develop overnight, and having those clear lines of communication and responsibilities, that culture takes time to build, and you get there, but it takes a while to bed in.
And I guess the point flows directly to a question that I have, or I guess a thought, but it'd be good to share it with you. How much is around, you know, building the culture and some of the structures and getting some, you know, training and the likes, and how much is there a need, and it's reflecting on other things we've seen today, around making sure that we have sufficient resource in place. And by that I mean, there's a couple of papers earlier where it was clear to us that they would struggle to deliver unless there was sufficient resource allocated. And so I'm just trying to, and this leads directly into the whole decision making, effectively. You know, are we giving ourselves, I'm asking the question of the governance group, have we given ourselves, or have we allowed the staff to have enough room to move? Have we given them enough, essentially, you know, budget and resource to do the job that is required internally? I think there's going to be a lot of external focus on external delivery, but have we focused on asking the question, have we given staff enough resource internally to deliver? So I guess that's sort of more of a question for the governance group. Morris?
Well, to follow on from that and from our conversation at afternoon tea time, and reading the parts of the report here about councillors and our function and our training and our ability to deliver our role, you know, we haven't really had, I see there's going to be some work done in this space, but we're conflicted in a sense that we have to respond to the people that ring us up at night time and say, what the hell are you doing? You've got all these cars driving around the place, you've got far too many staff and you're paying them, you know, far too much. And then we've got to put on our, as you said, we've got to put on our governor's hat and say, well, look, you know, what is best for the organisation and best for the region? So how can we manage that constant barrage of advice we get from the community to making sure that we are, you know, we are helping to run a fit and efficient organisation that delivers the responsibilities that are set out in law for us to deliver. That's a real challenge, I think. And some of us are better at it than others, I have to say. I'm good at it, but I'm just saying that my observation is that some are better than others.
No, I do quite, I definitely see there's two hats being worn by the, or that should be worn by the governance, in terms of one is representing the community and being the voice, but then there's another of putting another hat on and turning your eyes inwards and saying, is the organisation running the best that it can, and how, as a governor, do you ensure that is happening by, you know, ensuring that you're giving, you know, staff the ability to work well. Nicole.
Just as a response to your question, I think in 12 months' time we'll know better about the staffing. But some of the issues we've looked at today, if we improve those, we'll improve the efficiency of the organisation, and that'll be the time to actually have that question. But on the other issue, when we get into tense consultations or difficult positions, I remember the oath I have to take twice each time I become the chair, that we are here for the best for Southland. So it's not just one little group. It's, you've always got to get back to your oath and say, why are we here in the governance role?
There's a comment in here that staff have advised they're not clear on the strategic direction of the organisation, and I appreciate that process that we've just been through. The LTP has responded to the fact that this is one of those rainy day, and that perhaps the LTP, that solution that's emerged was quite different to what we were thinking when we started the LTP journey just close to a year ago. I guess the way that LTP is now landed, does that now provide a foundation to at least update the internal team on the strategy, or confirm the strategic direction? Does that help or make it easier, or does it make it harder?
So councillor, so long-term plans should absolutely, be a right against the strategy for delivery. And I think when we talk about the strategy and the narrative, it's about the complexity of the organisation and the fact that this is an organisation with a lot of different mandates to do very specific things. So bringing that together in a way that simplifies the nature of the work we do, I think it would be fair to say that we've struggled to do that in a way that's had a simplified narrative. And I think we've heard that commentary from councillors in the LTP conversations and in other committees and at council meetings. That's probably what we are referring to here. And I think none of these matters are straightforward. If we're looking at climate adaptation, for example, which is a lens that could be sitting right across all of our work program, how to make those objectives and the nature of what we feel the pathways for action should be clear, is not always so straightforward. And we work in a highly technical organisation with people who are very steeped and comfortable in complexity, but also is quite often comfortable in the certainty of complexity, but making that clear right across the business how all of that joins up and externally, I think is a narrative challenge and one that we really need to get on top of.
I was just reflecting, I think if you were to survey 12 councillors and ask them to articulate our strategic direction, I'm not confident you get a consistent and cohesive response as of today. Even the councillors might benefit from being privy to that conversation at some point.
I'm very pleased once we have settled with the LTP to be working directly on that, and that certainly I can say the executives put a significant amount of thought into a very straightforward framework to work through, but that strategic narrative, it's a priority for us because we see that as one of the most important things that we're doing.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Someone to move the report. Nicole, second. Phil, all in favour? Aye. It's moved. Appreciate it. Thank you. Right, we are going to move into public excluded. We need to read the reasons.
So moving to public excluded in accordance with section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987, and the particular interest protected by section 7 of the Act that are publicly excluded from the items listed. The specific grounds for excluding the public as specified by section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 are to prevent disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage, to enable any local authority holding the information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities, and to prevent the disclosure of information which would either be contrary to the provisions of a specified enactment or otherwise constitute contempt of court or of the House of Representatives.
Right, moved by Phil, thank you, and seconded by Nicole. Those in favour? Aye. Move to Q. Wait to get confirmation.